All right. Let's see. This says we are live. So we can give it a hot second.
And then we can just clip off those first few minutes.
Yeah, right. All right. So I guess I can give things a go. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the second episode of Let's Talk Comics, where myself and other members of the comics community discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium. Whether it be stories, creators, constructs, or adaptations, we kind of hit them all. This week, I'm really excited to introduce you guys to our co-hosts, Comic Boom and Joseph's Books. What's going on, guys? Thank you for coming to chat with us tonight.
Thanks. Great to be here, Dark Knight.
Yep. Thanks for inviting us on. We are so excited to talk some comics.
As always, my man. So this week, our topics are hidden gems in comic books. And by that, I mean fantastic writers and artists in comics today that don't really get as much love as they probably should. By suggestion of Comic Boom, each episode of Let's Talk Comics will kick things off with our pulls of the week, or comics that came out this week that we either recommend or anticipate the most. Since it was your idea, Comic Boom, do you want to start off with your pull of the week?
Well, as far as my pull of the week, I obviously haven't read them yet. I can tell you the ones I'm excited about. I suspect I might not be as excited about it when I read it, but probably I'm most anxious to read Batman issue 53, which
Agreed.
is the conclusion of Cold Days. I've already heard some mixed things about it, but I want to check that out. And then I'm also, surprisingly enough, I find myself fascinated by Infinity Wars ever since Thanos got his head chopped off. And by a certain member of the Guardian of the Galaxy. I'm really curious to see how that goes. And I don't know how many I should mention. I want you guys to mention some on your pull list. I'll just mention one more that I quite like, and that is I'm really curious about Aquaman issue 39, which is part 2 of the Sink Atlantis storyline. Because Aquaman wished that Atlantis would rise in issue 6 of Metal, and so that was a crossover with Suicide Squad. So I'm anxious to check out those 3. So.
Oh, nice, good picks. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, so like Comic Boom, I'm also reading the Infinity War issue number 2. The story just seems really intriguing in that regard, and again, having Thanos having been killed in the Prime issue. And just kind of like that little air of mystery about who did it. And then that being answered in issue number 1 was just fairly interesting. I mean, for me, kind of came off a little obvious, but still pretty good overall. I really liked the way they're taking it. And then the Injustice versus Masters of the Universe. I am a huge fan of the Injustice video games. And now having Injustice combined into a little 6-issue miniseries with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I'm really interested in that whole idea of just, all the people from Injustice just crossing over into the He-Man universe to bring back He-Man to fight their evil Superman. So I'm really curious to see, because the first issue was just so fascinating that it got me. And then the next comic the last comic I'm going to talk about just for this little opening segment is the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue number 30, continuing the Shattered Grid storyline. And I've actually been saving the Shattered Grid books just up until a few days ago, because I think this is the finale. And then, the next one would be the prelude to that. And just this entire comic book series has been nothing short of amazing. Boom Studios is absolutely destroying it with Power Rangers. It has just been awesome in just ways I can't ever imagine. I mean, I never thought I would see Power Rangers in such a mature, way, I guess you could say. But yeah, definitely this is my biggest pick for the week is this Power Rangers book.
Nice.
Well, you, Dark Knight?
Oh, yeah. So my pick of the week is actually Batman 53. I have been an avid critic and both lover of Tom King's Batman. It's been very up and down for me, so I'm not really afraid to say when I do and don't love something that Tom King's doing on Batman. However, this arc to me has been by far one of the best that he's done in his entire run on Batman. Um, for me, one of my biggest critiques has been of Tom King's Batman is really, really robotic dialogue, and here we get full, normal, human, organic dialogue, which is a big thing for me. But aside from that, the story is great, and the theme of Batman's infallibility as a construct and as this creature of the night, it is awesome. I think it's absolutely amazing the way they're dealing with this, and it's not something that's been done traditionally. The topic has been kind of stepped upon and alluded to, but nothing has been truly explored. And I actually read 53 right before we got on the air, and
So did I.
It's fantastic. I really, really enjoyed this issue. Mr. Freeze is one of my favorite Bat villains. So even though he kind of played a sidestepped role in this, I love the fact that he was in it and he wasn't done a disservice by any means. This book, even though it's not in your face, is definitely Bruce dealing with the I guess the downfall of his marriage and how he looks to the mantle of Batman in almost a very Frank Miller-esque way, that this is the thing that's going to save him. This is the creature that's gonna pull him up from the rafters and, you know, keep him safe. I don't want to give away too much, but it's an awesome book. Beautiful art by Lee Weeks, man. He's a monster. Anytime I see that guy's his name on a book, that enough is tempting enough to get me to pick a book up. So, you know, fantastic stuff. Comic Boom, I know you read it. I don't know if you want to comment on it any further, but I really enjoyed the issue.
In keeping with you, for people watching, I don't want to taint it. I'll let people enjoy it. I will say this though, without giving away any spoilers, that I think as a larger part of the narrative, I think I don't think there's a lot of build up to it. That is to say, I think a lot of this is, I frankly really think a lot of this is out of left field. Even though Tom King says there's build up to this in the previous 52 issues, I really don't think that the evidence shows that. But I will grant you this, that it's a deconstruction of Batman, specifically Bruce Wayne's perception of Batman, that we've not seen before. And in that respect, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very good in that regard. But as part of the larger narrative, I don't know how, you know, it explains. Tom King has said on Twitter that this basically explains the thematic basis of his entire 103 issue run. So he's got another 50 issues to go. He's planned for 103 issues. So this here is the key to everything. He's made that clear. So when you read it, knowing what that deconstruction is and where he's going with it, I have a greater appreciation of what Tom King is trying to do now. Whether or not I think it works, that'll be for a review, and you and I can talk about that later.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally respect where you're coming from, and I think that that's the beauty of, you know, the comic book community being able to communicate differing ideas without being a jerk about it. I think that there was a little bit of relevance to the overall narrative. It may not be in the most explicit way that you know, we might have interpreted that Tom King had been trying to kind of say, but I think that there are underlying notes of the story and of the theme and the overall that have been indicated, or that have been kind of the summation of his overall narrative on Batman, certainly from the Batman wedding issue, Batman number 50. I think that's even explicitly mentioned in the book, you know, how this is, you know, I think that overall, whether or not Tom King has always done it well, this is still pertinent to the deconstruction of Batman. I think he's tried to do it in different ways. Like I said, I don't think he's always executed. This arc in particular, I think he did very well. I think he does a good job at questioning what Batman is to us and what Batman is to him, without stepping all over the character. So I really dug it. Again, art was beautiful. I feel like we always, generally as comic book fans, we, myself included, we tend to review more thoroughly the writing, but the art was spectacular and the colors were awesome. I think the colors were actually a highlight of this entire story arc for sure.
I look forward to your review.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, we got a little bit of love in the chat from some Okie Dokie Dude and Taylor Pector saying, you know, what's up? And some Okie Dokie Dude had said that Tom King has a penchant for deconstruction. He does for sure. That's definitely something that's underlying in most of his popular works in comics. So, but with the getting our picks of the week out of the way, I think that it's time to get into the topic. And again, for those of you just joining us, it is hidden gems in comics, creators that are fantastic, but maybe don't get a little bit of love. We have a little bit of a list here. So, so if it's good by you guys, you want to maybe get started on the list?
Yeah, let's jump right in.
All right. So first up, I have Peter Tomasi. So for those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's been a longtime writer at DC Comics, was an editor, I think, between the late 90s and the mid 2000s, up until maybe even the New 52, if I'm correct. He's well known for his time on Green Lantern Corps. He just wrapped up an excellent run on Superman for Rebirth. He did New 52 Batman and Robin, amongst other things. I think this guy is fantastic. He is one of those guys that can pretty much write any character and not piss people off the way he characterizes them and the way he displays them for the world. His story, his craftsmanship for storytelling is great. I've never read anything by him where I'm sitting here poking massive plot holes in them. But just as an overview of him as a writer, I think he's spectacular. And I think that critically his Superman run was widely acclaimed, and yet you go to the comic book store and the standard comic book fan doesn't really know who he is, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I would say this, that really people talk a lot about his Superman run. But what really put him on the map and got him noticed, at least by me, is his run on Batman and Robin. I always say Grant Morrison created, basically, sort of essentially put young Damian Wayne on the map. That was Grant Morrison, but it was Peter Tomasi that made me love Damian Wayne.
I agree.
The way that he portrayed the relationship between Batman and his son Damian, that was all Peter Tomasi. And Patrick Gleason, we should give him a shout out too. The art of Patrick Gleason combined with Peter Tomasi's writing put Batman and Robin, Damian Wayne Robin, really on the map, and it really sort of created the idea that family can work in superhero stories. And carrying on into Superman, he just sort of brought those sensibilities with him when he wrote Superman, coming off with Dan Jurgens bringing back in Superman and Lois, and then Jonathan Kent. Peter Tomasi did a really good job sort of continuing those themes.
Yeah, and as a side note to that too, I think Gleason is often credited for taking part in a lot of Tomasi's recent scripts when they collaborate together. So that might also be partly due to Gleason. So giving credit where credit's due. I'm glad you mentioned that. And again, yeah, I mean, I've never hated Damian. I mean, I think from the get-go when Grant Morrison introduced him, he was kind of meant to be hated. And I kind of liked him for that. But like you said, it was Tomasi's New 52 Batman and Robin run that made me love him and feel sympathetic to him. And Tomasi does a good job at making us realize, as angry, kind of obnoxious comic fanatics, that Damian's a kid. Like, yes, he can kill 99% of the population and not bat an eye, but he's a kid. And that's something that you need to take into consideration. And not to mention, I think I'd give him more credit than Dan Jurgens for making Jonathan Kent the lovable character that he is right now. And what most people are saying is that Jonathan Kent is the highlight of DC Rebirth in its entirety as a character.
I think that's right. What do you think, Comic Joe?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely got to agree with Peter Tomasi. I mean, he's definitely one of those creators that, when you hear his name and stuff like that, you can kind of think, okay, he is a guy that does comic books, but then sometimes it escapes people exactly what he's done. I mean, I collected a few of the Batman and Robin in the New 52, primarily circling around the death of Damian Wayne when he was killed off. And like I just absolutely like loved that little segment in there and stuff like that. And then of course preceding that were they had those few books that came after where it was Batman teaming up with other people, and so it wasn't like Batman and Robin, it was like Batman and Nightwing and Batman and Two-Face or something like that. It was some of those books. And and I just really liked those few issues that I did get. I really enjoyed. And I followed the first few issues of the Superman Rebirth, and and I had to drop them because couldn't afford all those comic books. But just what he did in those few bits, and like you said, and stuff like introducing into it with Jonathan Kent and stuff like that, which I think has been a phenomenal character. I mean, heck, I mean, when you go over to Damian Wayne and Jonathan Kent teaming up in Super Sons, I really loved that book. That was actually my #1 book from 2017. That was just a phenomenal run overall. But just having him start out in the Rebirth Superman book was just handled so effectively that you just couldn't help but love Jonathan Kent. And then of course when it came to Back to the New 52 with the Batman and Robin book, again, Damian Wayne was a character that definitely started out as people just kind of like, okay, he's annoying, and that's just sort of it. But then, him growing throughout the New 52 run and turning into a character that a lot of people ended up liking, because I definitely noticed a shift in opinion of Damian Wayne from his introduction to, who he is as a character now.
Yeah, I mean that's well put. And and again, Super Sons, man, Adventures of Super Sons came out like what was it, last week or the week before?
It was like 2 weeks ago, I think.
Oh my god, yeah. even that issue was great. And the beauty of it is, right, the Super Sons book by Tomasi isn't. It's not going to be looked at something that is this artistic highlight of the comic book genre. But that's kind of the beauty of Super Sons, is it's an awesome book, and it doesn't try to be anything more than what it is, and it does what it does better than anything else right now. Not to mention spectacular art. I think the coupling of Damian and Clark is better. I'm sorry, Damian and John is better than Bruce and Clark.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean after reading Super Sons straight through, I definitely love their relationship with Damian and Jonathan, because it's just it comes from such a I guess you could say innocent perspective and stuff, because these are kids, they're growing up together, and experiencing all of these, all these different hardships of just growing up and learning how to deal with that. And even through the Super Sons book, you can see that Damian is influencing John as much as John is influencing Damian, and they're both growing because of that. And that's one of the biggest impacts I think that Super Sons has had as a comic book, and also just having it be also such lighthearted comic book fun, as opposed to, the rest of the current DC universe, which is just more of that dark, gritty sort of deal.
Yeah, I mean, so go ahead, bud.
No, I totally agree. Super Sons, it's funny because right now with all the DC universe being DC's really firing on all cylinders right now, but they are a little bit darker, and the Super Sons really stands out because it's that sort of that bright light and that humor and that teenage or pre-teenage sarcasm that bodes so well. You can get away with narcissism with a teenager better than you can with an adult, because
absolutely,
if you tried to portray Batman like Damian's written, he would really be unlikable, but Damian gets away with it. And Jonathan, if you portray an adult as too naive and stupid, you got a stupid adult character, but you can get away with it with Jonathan Kent. So you got a nice juxtaposition of the extreme narcissism and extreme niceties, and that's why they work so well together.
And I think, and coattailing on that, I think one of the beautiful things about their relationship that has been established by Tomasi, is that they're rubbing off on each other in the smallest of ways. You know what I mean? Like Jonathan is kind of slowly becoming more of a smartass, whereas Damien, like he's easily seen a lot of character development over the last 2 years, and it's because of John. It's because he sees that there is some sort of, I guess, benefit to being gracious in some ways. Whether or not he's super explicit is another thing, you know, but the way they impact each other is great. And I think that it's an accolade to what, again, tying this back into the writer, what Tomasi has been setting up for them. And speaking of Tomasi, we got some talk in the chat. Comic Man Jake said hi to all three of us. So what's going on?
Hello.
Jake.
How you doing, Comic Man?
He also said that Tomasi is one of his favorite writers of all time, and I don't blame you. You know, everybody has their top 5, top 10, top 20, and such. I certainly don't blame that. I don't know what you guys think, but Tomasi, I think his strength is in his consistency.
Yeah, I would agree.
We also got a new member of the chat that I actually haven't seen around before, Lord Vader, just saying how's it going. So what's going on, man? Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Vader.
What's going on, Lord Vader?
So I think somebody had mentioned something about Super Sons, but I'm not sure. Oh, so some okie dokie dude back when we were talking about how Super Sons is kind of like the levity of the DC universe, he said he likes dark and gritty stuff, and I think we all do to some degree, and we all do tastefully. But that's the beauty about Super Sons in a universe right now that is generally quite dark and gritty and frankly a little bit depressing. Super Sons is that accent of levity. You know what I mean? It's like when you have a really good chocolate and like a slight hint of fruit. You know what I mean? That's the only analogy I can make.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was thinking kind of a one of myself. So like I would almost equate it to eating sushi, right? Where, you know, you have the main course, which is, you know, the main of the DC universe, right? And then of course, on every plate of sushi, you also get a little bit of wasabi and a little bit of ginger. Why? Because you need to clean the palate before you go to the next flavor, right? Before you go to the next piece. That way you're getting the best of everything. So like I would say that Super Sons is almost that little bit of ginger that you get to clean the palate at the end in order to, you know, reset yourself so that you go back and almost get just a nice little break from the impact of the overall meal.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I agree.
I really like sushi.
Something I just realized too through the guys in the chat. For the first time, my face is actually showing up on the internet, and I didn't know it was happening this time. So,
yep.
Of course, when I stop trying, it actually happens. But with that aside, yeah, Tomasi is a fantastic writer. Again, his consistency is what makes him strong. I've never read anything by him I didn't like. I've read stuff I didn't love, and I think that's all up to taste. You know, the Super Sons of Tomorrow, I think narratively, was a cool idea, and I think that it fell a little bit short for me on the execution. But again, Tomasi has great ideas and is generally pretty consistent.
Yep, I agree.
So did you guys have anything else about Tomasi before we move on to the next creator?
No.
No, I think we covered pretty much everything. We all love him. There you go.
Yeah, we all love Tomasi. We should make a shirt. We all love
I'll say one thing about Tomasi. I'll promote his book. He did a graphic novel on the building of the Brooklyn Bridge that I've been meaning to buy. I've heard good things about it. I've watched some documentaries on the building of the Brooklyn Bridge, but he actually did. He did some years of research, and he's actually got it's received critical acclaim. So I forget what it's called, but I think it's literally called The Bridge. Oh yes, The Bridge, right? Yeah. So that we should probably check that out. So I heard good things about it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's a New York native, so I'm sure that book is near and dear to his heart, and that always makes content better. But before we move on, I've actually met Tomasi. He's a super, super, super cool guy. When I was looking into potentially writing comic books, you know, I had brought a script of mine to him and a plot outline, and he actually took the time to read it in his busy schedule.
Right on.
And he was nice enough to sign this. He gave me a copy of the script for Superman #1 from DC Rebirth and signed it.
Nice.
Because I was looking. It's awesome. because I was looking to learn just like the structure of comic book writing, or at least ideas on how to do it. So really, really nice guy. If you guys ever see him at a con or want to meet him, then look him up. Really cool guy. And I think that's always a better incentive to buy their content. Not only is it awesome, he is awesome.
Right
So
on. Good to hear.
Yeah.
Right
So
on.
moving on without my rambling, we have Robert Venditti, who is another writer for DC Comics right now. He's really well known for helping relaunch the Valiant universe a couple years ago. In the New 52, he had a pretty lengthy Flash and Green Lantern run, and in DC Rebirth, he just wrapped up his Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps book with issue number 50.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, well, he's your choice, right?
Right. Yep.
Right. Yeah, because I know that he's writing Hawkman right now.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying Hawkman. I will say this: Venditti manages. He managed very well, I think, with Green Lantern because he's capable of telling. I found that his Green Lantern, despite the stories dragging out somewhat, which I defend him a little bit because when you're writing two comic books a month, you really have to. I imagine as a writer, it can be very challenging to put out that much output for one comic. That type of publishing schedule can be difficult, but there was always action, there was always adventure in Green Lantern. It was always a fun read, and so I got to give him credit on that. Every issue consistently always had some action, and even when the story maybe dragged a little bit, there was always he was always good at describing action and writing action scenes, and you really see that in the pages of Hawkman right now. I got to give him credit. Issue 3 of Hawkman, again, not a lot of plot progression, but he really knows how to inspire an artist. I'll give him that much. And he's definitely somebody that I don't think he's gotten a lot of recognition. I think precisely because he sort of flies under the radar a little bit. And I mean, he's on it when you're on a title for so long, like 50 issues of Green Lantern, and even in New 52, I think he came on in the later part of the New 52 on Green Lantern, if I recall correct. He was on Green Lantern a long time, but he's definitely earned his place, and he's definitely owing some more love than he's getting.
Oh yeah, I definitely would agree to that too. Because like, I mean, my first experience with Venditti was when he took over on the Flash for the New 52 run, the latter half there.
Same.
And you know, and I just remember it's like, you know, reading it and instantly just enjoying what he was doing. I mean, I enjoyed what came before and stuff like that. I thought those were some very good stories, and that he came on to and like, you know, was taking it in the, you know, he's trying to keep it kind of on track, but also taking it in his own direction. That is awesome. By the way, Boom, I like that. And yeah, there's the Flash.
That's sweet.
Love it.
Yeah,
and,
gotta get the Vinny mates.
You know, and then again, I mean, I know I didn't stay on him for too long and stuff like that. I mean, you know, his latter half of the Flash I was in, and then once again, I got acquainted with him with Hal Jordan, the Green Lanterns, more specifically in the Zod's Will story arc that was going on. I absolutely love that. I always enjoy when someone takes a character from a different superhero, like a villain from a different superhero, and, you know, throws them into a different book, because we know how Superman would deal with Zod, you know. So I thought it was interesting to see how the Green Lanterns would deal with Zod when, you know, when that was going down.
It also sorry to interrupt. It also like articulates the interconnectivity of the universe. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree with that, you know. So I just really enjoyed what was being done there. And then when it came to Hawkman, I thought he took a very interesting approach, because over the years, we've had so many different versions of Hawkman, you know, one where he comes from, you know, when he's an alien from Thanagar, the cursed Egyptian thing going on. And then you know, when he came down onto the Hawkman issue #1, he's like, you know, let's just do everything. You know, it's just kind of like he's like doing something, you know, he's taking what was pre-established and working with what he's got. And I think he's able to do that in a very good way. I mean, and because I've read him in such small spurts, I haven't noticed like what Boom has noticed with, you know, some of his shortcomings in his writings. But again, you know, overall, I just think he's just, you know, been for the bit I've read, he's done really, really good.
Yeah. He's certainly not one of those guys that, you know, gets like the superstar recognition like a Scott Snyder or a Jeff Johns. And I think he
Yeah.
does I think the beautiful thing about Venditti is he's kind of a chameleon in comics. I think that he's able to take what somebody else is doing and continue to deliver that same content just as good. And I think that's also like evident in like the metal tie-ins, the Bats Out of Hell when it tied into his Green Lantern book. Really well done. And him and Tomasi are both guys that I think that do superbly well with maintaining characterization and even adding to them without kind of making them feel overpacked or something that they're not. The thing I love about Venditti's Green Lantern Corps book right now is, and I'm sure most people that are reading it feel the same way, is the way he writes each individual member of the Corps, whether or not it's someone as big as Hal or John or Kyle or Guy. They all have their individual characters. They're not like, yes, they're background characters for the sake of story, but in terms of being fleshed out characters that exist that aren't just these things on a page, like he writes them so that they feel like they're individuals. And not to mention, again, the way he writes the four corpsmen, as in the four big Green Lanterns of Earth, are spectacular. The way that they feed off of each other in a scene feels like actual actors who have been working with each other on films for years, feeding off of each other's chemistry with one another.
Yeah, he's good. He's good with dialogue. He's good with dialogue. And again, I wasn't trying to be too harsh on his plot. I don't want to say anything negative. I just meant to say I felt that the plot wise, I think Venditti came on to Green Lantern and I think I felt some of the plot lines were sort of like retreaded, but he's a very good with dialogue. I'll grant him that. And I really enjoy, like, it's going to be interesting to see what Venditti does with Hawkman, because there's fewer players, there's fewer characters in Hawkman. So he doesn't have such a large cast like Green Lantern to work with Hawkman. And I'm really hoping that he can, that more of his strengths on the dialogue, on character development with Hawkman can really be built up, because Hawkman's got so much potential, and Venditti has got he's very imaginative, and you know, Hawkman with all his reincarnations and on different planets, you can pretty much take Carter Hall anywhere in the multiverse, because he's been reincarnated on different times and different planets. So Venditti really there's a lot of potential there with Hawkman. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he does.
Yeah. I mean, I think the beautiful thing about him tackling the Green Lantern universe is that he's able to handle those kind of crazy landscapes that you can go to with Hawkman, especially after him in singling in on the fact that, like you said, he's been reincarnated throughout both time and space. So I think we're going to see some really, really cool things throughout his Hawkman run. Like I've said in previous things all throughout the internet, I didn't have a lot of experience with Hawkman. I had tried, but it was always way too confusing. And and you know, from my perspective, I feel like he's doing a really good job at melding the things that old time fans love about Hawkman based on what I've seen other people say about his work, and people like me who don't have a lot of Hawkman exposure, and finding a good happy medium. So, you know, Venditti, really great writer. And I know, Joe, you're a big Valiant guy. And, you know, a couple guys like Taylor in the chat were mentioning his time on Exo Manowar. So what were your thoughts on him tackling the Valiant universe?
Oh, I mean, when the Valiant universe came back swinging there back in 2016, right around, I thought that, you know, he actually he helped bring it back in a very, very good way, because I mean, I've been reading the Valiant universe since, you know, way back in the early 90s when they first came about. I mean, I was on Bloodshot, Ninjak. I just loved reading these books, and specifically what you were talking about with Exo Man of War, I really loved the setup and how that was going. And Boom's chair is squeaking, and I can hear it every time. But yeah, it was just such an interesting perspective to come at with this character that I've read before, and you know, during his initial volume, and just seeing it tackled in a new light. Really, I think helped expand the Exo Man of War mythos, and you know, who he is as a character and stuff like that. So, I mean, if you wanted to see book come out swinging. His X-Men War definitely came out swinging.
Yeah.
Actually, and that raises a good point. All of the Valiant universe, you want to talk about an entire publishing company that is underrated. There's so many great stories with the Valiant universe. Right now, I'm flexing. You know, I agree with you, Comic Show, because right now, Exo-Man of War and Ninjak and Secret was another one. Anyways, there's at least 3 titles right now with Valiant I'm getting. I'm just loving it. So.
Yeah. I mean, I've yet to actually even see or read a bad book, in my opinion. I mean, heck, they're even doing currently the Harbinger Wars 2, which is sort of like, you know, their version of a civil war, I guess you could say. But it's even that one is being written and done in not meaning to go off topic, but is being written and done in such a good and interesting way. I almost think that when Marvel was doing their Civil War 2, like, that's in my opinion is what it should have been, is, when it comes down to it. And yeah, again, Comic Boom, and I agree, the entire Valiant universe is vastly, vastly underrated. But hopefully, once the Bloodshot movie comes out starring Vin Diesel, we will they will hopefully start to
get some
pick up in popularity. Exactly. Just pick up a little bit in popularity and get some love.
I hope there's I hope after that movie comes out, there'll be a fan edit with him in all the Bloodshot makeup and costume, juxtaposed in the Pacifier movie from the early 2000s.
Oh God, I would love to see. Heck, I just might do that myself though when that happens. Then
I would literally watch that video 2,000 times on your channel. I will give you all of the views. But again, closing out on Venditti, awesome writer. One of those chameleons in comics that are able to take these characters and stories and what's being done with them and both do them justice by way of what's happened before and add something to them. If you guys haven't read any of his Green Lanterns, if you were fans of Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, I'd suggest going back to when he started. I think it was like the mid-20s of the New 52 Green Lantern, and then jumping on to his DC Rebirth Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. There's no beat to be skipped between them. And to be quite honest, he's maybe one of a handful of guys, one of a handful of guys that I can say truly can carry the mantle of a Green Lantern book after Jeff Johns did what he did. So if you guys aren't reading it, go check out his stuff. Most of it's collected in trade. I'd highly suggest it. And again, another one of those guys that I've met at a convention. We were at another little side story. We were at the DC booth, and I was talking to him again about story and plotting and just breaking concepts. And one of the guys at the DC booth was like trying to get me to move on. So he took one of the artist like sketch pads and drew me this little picture of Mogo just so that they couldn't tell me to leave, so that he could keep talking to me. So a genuinely really cool guy. Super responsive on Twitter. So if you guys haven't, again, another one of those guys who both create amazing content and is an amazing guy. And there are a couple guys again on this list that we're going to tackle like that. And another underrated being in the current comics landscape is Rafa Sandoval, and he kind of ties into Venditti. He's been doing a lot of work on his Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, with Venditti, and I mean, he's so good. He's so good. Have you guys been reading the Hal Jordan Green Lantern Corps book for Rebirth?
Yeah, I got it.
I've done a few here and there. Like I said, primarily with the Zod's Will, and then a few before that. But I agree on that 110%. The artwork in the Hal Jordan the Green Lanterns has been phenomenal. I love just every single line he draws. Boom, right there. Boom's got the issue number 50, which, oh my God. I mean, just the artwork on the inside of that looks just simply amazing.
Spectacular.
There's no word for it, really. Just how good the artwork in the books is.
It's so clean. I think the way look at that. It's like he does a good job at drawing these huge cinematic scenes without getting sloppy or overdrawn. And for those of you that have been reading the Hal Jordan the Green Lantern Corps, in the beginning, it was him swapping off with Ethan Van Sciver. I mean, say what you want about the guy as a person. Ethan Van Sciver is a great artist, and it takes someone of real talent to switch off with someone of that caliber. And not, I didn't see any complaints, and that was something, you know, that a lot of people had problems with the DC Rebirth line and the double publishing in general, was the flip flopping of artists. And although their styles are extremely different, Rafa Sandoval keeps everything up here with everyone else. Like when I really noticed him was in the at the end of the first arc in the Rebirth Hal Jordan book. It's this big brawl between Sinestro and Hal Jordan, and I didn't think anybody else could draw that as well as Ethan Van Sciver, and Rafa Sandoval kept up, no questions asked.
I'm actually gonna I'm gonna say this about Sandoval, that I think he's Sandoval. I actually find him better than Ethan Van Sciver. Ethan Van Sciver, if I was going to be critical, I actually find that his often when he draws figures, they're often static. I don't think Ethan Van Sciver is as good as some artists at drawing motion and fight scenes. They just seem a little bit posed. They seem a little bit immovable sometimes. That's just my criticism of Van Sciver, and I think that Sandoval, there's more fluidity. There's more of a sense of movement and motion in Sandoval's art, and that's why it works so well. And he's very, very good, like you said. If you look at the backgrounds, he's also a little better at backgrounds than Van Sciver is too. I think in terms of the detail in the backgrounds, which, you know, again, it's just very, very impressive, and that is so huge, and it works so well with. As you said before, with Venditti's propensity, talents at writing many characters at once, to have someone who could put that many characters on a page, well, that's obviously a pretty good fit.
Absolutely, and I think that you know, that's a huge compliment to him. You know, and I don't disagree with you. I think after hearing that, the more I think about it, the more I agree with it. I think by the end of me finishing a sentence, I'll probably agree with you 100%, because the beautiful thing about Sandoval's art is he's so collaborative with Venditti as a writer, in the sense that we can indulge ourselves in the feelings and emotions of the moments between the characters, particularly, you know, the four Green Lanterns of Earth, Guy, Hal, John, and Kyle. But we also get this big cinematic experience when it comes to these huge space battles. And the more I think about it, again, I think one of the reasons why I love Sandoval's art so much is the fluidity that you're alluding to in his artwork, and how it feels very organic rather than these things that are on a page.
Oh yeah, I would have to probably even agree with you on that one too. I mean, because whenever I read a comic book and I'm commenting on the artwork in any shape or form, one thing I'm always looking at is perspective, the perspective of the picture. Are you giving it to me from a frontal view, a side view, a back view, or is it just angled somewhere different that's going to give it that more, you know, a little bit more of a 3D pop to it? You know, like just on that cover alone, like what you were showing there. I mean, if you just look at how it's coming from the angle rather than just, you know, a side or straight front, it's just done with, you know, just such precision, I guess you could say. And then just the detail that he gets in there, it just works overall, you know, when it comes to you know, when it comes to depicting the action that the writer has given him. And yes, whenever you have you know, a team of a good artist and a good writer that just collaborates so well with each other, we do get books like Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns in its currency and stuff. And just, you know, in some ways, I mean, you know, you could even say, I don't want to say like completely rivals, you know, maybe Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder, but it's definitely up there, you know, and because they are a good team. There's no question about that.
Yeah. And I'm just going to say this, Boom, I think you should make a little bit of noise so the camera focuses in on that artwork so everybody can truly understand.
Well, okay. Well, sorry. I don't want to interrupt my learned colleagues here, but yeah, okay. I'll just talk. I mean, the art, that's Heroes in Crisis. The art here is pretty good of Sandoval's art. This is an issue 50 of in a story arc called Last Charge, Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. some of the full. I'll try to get to the full page epic spreads. Again, it's really good art. I mean, everyone very good at showing the motion again. Very fluid. You always. It's not only that, but he's also really good at facial expressions, which is also well. I mean, look at this battle sequence with the backgrounds. It looks like you know, it's almost like watching Star Trek on TV after the Klingons are battling the Federation. I mean, there's bodies floating around in dead space. I mean, it's just really well done, and you gotta, like I said, it's a beautiful thing to see and to be able to read, and definitely one of those hidden gems we're talking about.
Absolutely. And I think too, your sentiments about the static expression of Van Sciver's art was echoed in the chat again by Taylor Pector. And I think that's a testament again to how good Rafa Sandoval is, and especially because the entire premise of the Green Lantern mythos is based off of emotion. And if we can't look at the body language and the facial expression on a character and understand how they're thinking or feeling, I feel like it almost defeats the main theme of most of what Green Lantern stories try to deliver.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
So do you guys have any final comments on Rafa Sandoval?
Just buy those books. It's good
Buy
artwork.
those,
Yeah, that's
buy
right.
those-
Buy the book.
buy those books, boys. Another writer, that the next creator I have on here is a writer who I have had the distinct pleasure of interviewing and talking to and reading a lot of some of his content, is Brian Edward Hill.
Peanut butter jelly right here.
Oh man. So he's finishing up. I think he has one more issue to go on his 5-issue Detective Comics story arc. He's been penning Michael Cray for the Wildstorm universe, the Wildstorm universe spin-off book, and he has a really famous or pretty well-known independent title called Postal. You know, I'm a little bit biased because he's a great guy, but I think if Rocky makes a little bit of noise over there, you'll see the most recent issue of Detective Comics.
Yeah, this is the most recent issue of Detective Comics, issue 986. He's got one of his favorite characters is Cassandra Cain, and he's got a very unique. Well, he's got an interesting take on her that he spoke about at length in your interview. That you're great. You did a great interview, guys. Check out Dark Knight's interview of Brian Edward Hill. Great interview. He talks a lot about Cassandra Cain, and yeah, it's really good. It's definitely worth checking out. I love his Postal. It's actually my favorite. Postal is a fantastic story. It's about the lead character is a kid with Asperger's whose mother controls a town controlled by criminals, where the FBI send all their criminals to live, and this kid with Asperger's ends up basically running this town, and the characterization, you really appreciate how good he is at writing, because you know, how do you write somebody with Asperger's? And I know he did a lot of research about it, and well, to cut to the chase, it's such an excellent book, because imagine a mafia-like setting, but imagine the Godfather is actually kind of a young 25-year-old kid with Asperger's, and he's got all this power, and how he solves the problems dealing with other criminals is really it's a fantastic read.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read Postal, but I can echo the positive sentiments towards Hill's writing from his Detective Comics in particular. I think the beautiful thing that he does is he takes characters and he's able to challenge them in ways that aren't common, especially with a character like Batman, Bruce Wayne, who is very convicted in his approach to most anything. He makes him question himself. And I think for a writer to be able to do that with a character and have it feel authentic and organic is it's an accolade. You know, Bruce Wayne being Batman in itself is a sentiment to how driven and how committed he is to what he does. And by doing so, you have to be convicted to the way you operate and the way you do things. And in the Detective Comics run, he creates this villain that makes Batman question who he was, who he is and who he needs to be in order to do what he does.
Karma.
Yeah.
The villain Karma.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great name for a villain too. It's amazing. I'm surprised the name Karma hasn't been used before, but I don't think it has.
Yeah. I mean, he's a cool villain, and you know, again, I've because I interviewed Brian, I read each one of the issues that had come out thus far, you know, 3, 4, 5 times just to really get a handle on his writing. And I think the fact that I was able to do that and not get bored is saying something about how well written his stuff is and how many themes are embedded deep within what's going on. And part of the conversation I had with him is how as a creative, we're often sponges, and that he even includes themes in his writing that he doesn't intentionally do, you know, like kind of like paranoia, for example, is a big one that you see in both his Michael Cray and in his Detective Comics. So you know, so yeah, there we go. So Rocky has Michael Cray.
Yeah, just
right.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, he's really good. I like the fact too that I he doesn't play up the politics either. He's just a great guy and a great writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that he's given some love to Black Lightning in Detective Comics.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the best characterization of Black Lightning. Frankly, I got Black Lightning comics going back to the late 70s. I remember Black Lightning's, I think, first appearance in Superman, and or is it? Yeah, it was anyways.
Yeah.
Let's just say that I really like his Black Lightning, and I like that he's incorporating Black Lightning, bringing Black Lightning to Gotham, and in that same storyline with that new villain Karma. It's just very well done. It's a joy to read.
And again, he's one of those guys that handles characterization very well. I think that he's hit pretty much every member of the Bat family well. I don't have a lot of Black Lightning experience. You know, I picked up that mini series that Tony Isabella just finished, which I assume is in promotion of the Fantastic TV show. But the thing I love that he does in his detective is juxtaposing Jefferson Pierce Black Lightning's experience as a superhero and what he does as an educator in modern society. I think that it's not something that somebody would often think of, can make a connection, and they do, like, very well.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Nice. Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I know, you know, Brian Edward Hill's writing. I mean, as the segment's called Hidden Gems, he was actually a hidden gem that I honestly didn't really know about until you know, DKN started talking about him, and then like had his interview and whatnot. And I kind of just feel like I've been missing out on that little bit of his Detective Comics run.
Dude, you should.
So like, oh yeah, well, I mean, I already decided that when they release the trade paperback of that, I'll probably go pick that up at that point. You know, and then try to find maybe some back issues on this Postal comic book. Because I mean, just from the interview alone, he just seems like a really, really great guy, and you know, just having like, you know, both you and Comic Boom say that he's just a phenomenal writer, you know, and I trust you guys. I trust y'all's opinions on that. So that's you know, I look forward to checking out some of his work. Definitely.
There we go. Boom's got all the visuals for us today.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, guys, Postal is it's such a perfect name for it, because you think of Postal, you think of somebody getting angry and going postal, going crazy, and imagine all the crazies all living in the same place, trying to make a living in a small town that nobody knows about, and being, you know, I don't know, it's just really great. I've yet to pick up the hardcovers on this, but yeah, this is a great series.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. That's something that I'm definitely going to look into reading. And before my interview with him, I actually started checking out his Michael Cray, and I have zero exposure to the Wildstorm universe, besides random cameos in the Grayson title in the New 52, and from what you see in the Flashpoint book. But you know, he made me like the character within 2 issues. And for being a character that's not something that is I guess, to the iconicism of a Batman or a Superman or Wonder Woman. I think that's quite difficult, especially me being a somewhat established comic book fan that kind of knows what I'm looking for. My sentiments can only be positive towards Brian Edward Hill, both as a writer and as a person. Having gotten to speak to him, he's a spectacular guy. Again, fantastic writer, spectacular guy. We spent about 45 minutes of my interviewing with him discussing philosophy, and then found a way to integrate that into a discussion on comic books and the Batman character as a whole. So spectacular guy. He's the Obi-Wan Kenobi of social media. Finds a way to articulate his point without discriminating or kind of putting his sights or his crosshairs on someone else in their opinion. So if you're not reading his stuff, you should be. His last issue of Detective Comics for this story at least comes out next week. If you guys aren't reading it, go back, start it from the beginning. It's one of those things that you can read over and over and over again and find something new every time. So
yeah, agreed.
So
Sounds
again,
like a plan on that.
yeah, so I don't want to give away too much about his Detective Comics run. I've done reviews on 2 of the books, so if you guys in the audience haven't checked it out, go check it out on my channel. It'll give you a good feel for the type of stuff that he's doing in Detective, and it'll help you decide whether or not you want to read it for yourself, which you should. So moving on from Brian.
Well, I just wanted to say before we get any further on, I'm actually out of time and I need to bounce. But thank you for letting me on the show. As always, it's great talking to you. Dark Knight Nations, Comic Boom, it's always nice talking to you too.
Thanks.
Good talking to you, Comic Joe.
Thank you so much for coming on, brother. It's always a joy chatting with you, and hope you have a good rest of your night, man.
Hey, you too. Both of y'all take care.
Later, brother. Have a good one.
Bye.
Alrighty, so we are down to the final 2. So the next guy I have on is another artist who I think is a little bit more low key. His name's Fernando Pasarin. I had found his work somewhere in the New 52. I've seen his stuff on Green Lantern and Justice League and a little bit of Detective in the New 52. Have you read any of his stuff before?
You're gonna have to. What's he currently drawing?
I don't think he is a reoccurring artist. He kind of just pops in on things. I feel like the last thing I read him on might have been one of the most recent issues of the Hal Jordan book. I'm not 100% sure. But keeping things short and sweet, his artwork is really, really clean. Again, the whole point of this conversation is discussing hidden gems, and I think his stuff often goes unnoticed. So if you guys haven't, I would look him up and just and check out his artwork, man. It's one of those things where you look at it immediately, and next second it's your lock screen on your phone or something.
Did you say Pasarin?
Yeah, Pasarin.
Yeah, Fernando Pasarin. Yeah, he did issue 47 of Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps.
Yeah, I think his artwork is really clean.
Yeah, well, it is, and he did a really good job of Hector Hammond and Hal Jordan. I never really paid much attention to it, but it obviously is very good.
And the beauty of it is with everything that we said about Rafa Sandoval, with Pasarin picking up, I'm sure there was no complaints on my end. What about you?
You mean complaints
about him kind of like stepping in and doing an issue between some of Sandoval's work?
Oh, no, I mean, no, on the contrary. In fact, I mean, the level of detail, it's actually greater detail here. I mean, he's got a lot more finer. His lines are more fine and a little bit more defined. Very well done. You know what? I mean, it's in keeping with, there seems to be a theme with a lot of these hidden gems, and that's the Green Lantern.
Yeah.
It's almost like we take it for granted, and that's why it's probably good we're having this discussion, because this is really good. Honestly, I wasn't even paying attention. And I read comics all the time, and so I thank you for bringing it to my attention, because I didn't know. I've been staring at this artist for a while, obviously, and I never registered in my head. So, shame on me.
Yeah, no worries, man. I see that's again, it's the purpose of this discussion is to bring to light some of these creators who, we might look over because and I think I don't blame you on a book like Hal Jordan the Green Lantern Corps where it double ships and you're regularly getting fantastic art. Getting another fantastic artist, you just kind of come to expect it. But you think about it and you really look into it, it's like, man, his work is great. The amount of detail is insane. And that's I see this big, how, I maybe like mid 70s into the 80s, there was like the British invasion of comics.
Yeah, yeah.
I think right now, in terms of artistry, we're seeing a Latin invasion of comics. Rafa Sandoval, Jorge Jimenez, Fernando Passarin, even if you count Ivan Reis, who's Brazilian, Joe Prado, really fantastic artists, some of which, have big names and some of which are rising superstars like Jorge Jimenez. But, really, really talented guys. And their art styles are all very distinct. There are a lot of guys that are great that, you can see echoes of Jim Lee or like David Finch, but all of their art styles. I can't think of anybody that is remotely, close to what they're doing in terms of their style.
Yeah, no, that's very true. My buddy, another YouTuber, Spike Valentine, he could comment quite a bit on all of the talent in Latin American artists because you're absolutely right, and well, you can tell by the names. I don't pretend to know where they're all from, but Latin America probably sounds about right when you look at the pronunciation of their names.
Right? Yeah, Latin America or Spain or
Yeah.
just generally these Latin folks, because they're not all Spanish, they're not all Brazilian, but these Latin folks are man, they are destroying it on art. Absolutely, and Passarin's no exception. So, if you guys haven't, go check out some of his work. Maybe throw him like a tweet on Twitter, just say, "Hey, man, like I found your work. I love your stuff." That was like when I first saw Rafa Sandoval on the Hal Jordan Green Lantern Corps. I think the tweet literally said, "You are a hidden gem in comics." And
Yeah.
and like you said, if it's not articulated by the little Green Lantern figure in front of your screen, Green Lantern's a commonality between a lot of these guys. Ivan Reis did a lot with Jeff Johns on Green Lantern too. So if there's any side theme to this whole thing, y'all should be getting into the Green Lantern if you haven't.
I'm gonna add one more gem, and it's not on the list that I gave you, but to be honest, as I'm thinking about it, I really like Jose Sayas' art on Doctor Strange. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's been an artist I've been following for over like 20 years now. This is a guy who's an artist. Check out Doctor Strange. His art, it's so smooth. It's just fantastic. It's written by Mark Waid. I think Doctor Strange is a really great comic right now. It's accessible and it's a great read. It's Doctor Strange searching the universe. Magic is gone on Earth, so he's trying to search for magic on other planets. And it's a great space epic, and the art is just really, really good. And again, it's another. I guess I'm assuming that Jose Sayas is is Latin American. I might be wrong, maybe Spanish, but in any event, he's still a hidden gem. And just for those of you who don't know, it was in Doctor Strange #3 where Doctor Strange acquired the Time Stone, which is now in the current Infinity Wars, and Mark Waid and Jose Sayas, they're doing a really good job on it. So just a shout out to that.
Yeah, I mean, good shout out indeed. I've heard a lot of really great things about the Doctor Strange run right now, so it's definitely something that I'm interested in checking it out. But
so, I should tell you, Dark Knight, I actually don't have, because I don't have my extra laptop with me. You have the list, so I can't remember all the stuff we had in our list. So
no worries. We'll hopscotch between some of our stuff now that I know that. So one of the first guys that you had on your list was Jim Zub.
Oh, this guy, Jim Zub is so prevalent that this is a guy who, well, actually, I think in many ways, I think he has gotten a lot of love. But this guy's written Champions. He's written Thunderbolts. He was a co-writer with Mark Waid and Al Ewing on the Avengers, that 16-issue weekly Avengers series, Avengers No Surrender. he really, one thing about Jim Zub as a writer, first of all, you talk about being a nice guy. I mean, I mean, one of the things what you've talked about when you talked about Brian Edward Hill and Peter Tomasi, these are just personable guys. Jim Zub is extremely personable. I've met him like twice at different comic conventions, both at the Calgary Comic Convention. He's extremely accessible. He's very nice. He's always willing to help people out. I know as a fact. I've spoken to people who he's helped out in the industry, he's always personable. And what I love about his writing is that he's a fan. You get a strong sense that he's a fan first because he actually cares about continuity. Mm-hmm. You know, so many writers give lip service to it, you know, and they'll say they always give themselves away when they say, well, you know, it's about story, not canon, you know, story over canon. To me, the best writers are the ones that know their subject matter. And yep. you cannot replace, you either know your history of comics or you don't. You can't pick it up on a weekend by reading 10 issues of a character history by reading 3 or 4 trades. Right. It's one of the reasons why, for example, Bendis is struggling. I think Bendis is struggling a little bit getting the voices right for the Justice League. Mm-hmm. He's just a Marvel guy. You can't just get the voices by reading 100 trade paperbacks over 2 months and expect to get their voices. Right. You know, when you're a comic fan first and then you're a writer, that helps. Jim Zub is the comic book writer who gets the characters. I tell you, when he writes the Champions right now, he's putting them through the ringer right now, and he creates a lot of drama. He knows these characters, and he does his research. And you talk to him on Twitter, he'll answer questions, and it's just it's a really great. He's a good guy.
Yeah, I heard his work on Champions is more consistent than what Mark Waid was doing at the beginning of the series. I heard that Mark Waid's Champions kind of started up here and kind of dropped off.
Yeah, no, that's the general consensus. I think in fairness, I think Jim Zub, the only reason he hasn't gotten more recognition is because he was writing titles for Marvel that came under a lot of heavy criticism flowing out of Secret Empire. Mm-hmm. He was writing Thunderbolts into Secret Empire, and I think I don't need to tell you or probably anyone watching, 2017 was a pretty tough year for Marvel in terms of PR.
Yeah.
And that affected a lot of their titles. But I got to tell you, for those of us who sort of tried to ignore a little bit of the Secret Empire controversy and just buy the books, Thunderbolts was really good. And it dealt right with Secret Empire. And Jim Zub, he did a really good job of creating his own stories and his own narratives. And he's also written Samurai Jack. He's also written he's written a whole slew for IDW. There's so many comic books that he's done that he has his own series called Wayward. And it is a manga series. It's been picked up by Manga UK. It's going to be we're going to see it in. It's been picked up by other media, TV in the UK.
Oh, that's cool.
Wayward, it's sort of like manga in Japan. He's actually lived in Japan for a number of years. I spoke to him, and he's got some. So he's got the visuals in his Wayward series. It's on issue 28. I think it's got one more issue coming out in 29. If you can pick up Wayward, it's his creator-owned series. It's really good. It's like manga but drawn with a little bit more of a Western style art. Not completely manga, and it's really good stuff. And that
sounds really cool. Yeah. I mean, I've heard good things about him, and I know he's currently on the Infinity Wars Prime series, correct?
Infinity Wars. I'm not. Is he on Infinity Wars Prime? I'm not.
Or whatever the current event coming out is. I think he's on it.
You might be right. In Infinity Wars, why don't I? Oh, well, Jim Duggan is writing Infinity Wars.
Okay.
Not Jim Zub.
Mm-hmm.
Zub is. Yeah, I know Zub is Champions right now. I'm trying to remember what other Marvel series he writes. I don't know if he's writing another Marvel series.
Yeah, I thought I saw his name on something big recently. I don't know. I might be wrong. I'm a little bit out of it. But I mean, I haven't read a lot of his work, but recently he seems like one of those writers like Jim Duggan, for example, who have kind of been skating through all of Marvel's bad publicity and putting out solid books. So it definitely makes me want to check out more of his body of work.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about Zub?
No, I'm good. I no, there's not much to say other than the fact that if I would recommend that people follow him on Twitter, just type in Jim Zub, his name will come up. He's a great guy, and yeah, he's always great at. He gives great advice, free advice on Twitter, and he loves his fellow creators. He's just a great guy.
That's again, like we've said multiple times in this discussion. When a creator is a good person, it's always that much more rewarding to read their stuff. So, for sure, awesome. Cool. So we'll move on. And something too, I do want to start airing around in the chat. I've seen a couple of you guys start discussing a couple of people who you think are underrated. Start if we haven't mentioned them already, start putting them down in the comments so that by the time we finish what we have here, maybe we can throw in a couple of your sentiments in the chat. So the next person we have on the list I'd put down was James Tynion. He just recently finished a pretty long run on DC Rebirth Detective Comics, which I think was probably the most consistent Batman related book throughout Rebirth, if you ask me. Yeah. And he just had a spectacular entrance onto Justice League Dark. I dug the hell out of that book, man. Justice League Dark #1 I thought was spectacular. And again, a strength of Tynion is, like a lot of the other writers that I bring up, so if that indicates anything about me, characterization is important. Very important. And like you said, the love of these characters and where they've been, what they've done, and how that correlates to who they are now is so important. And I think that James Tynion, for most things that I've read of him as of recent years, fundamentally understands the characters he writes. And that's why he writes them, because he loves them and understands them.
Yeah, I think as Detective Comics run, it was really long, and but he dealt with he I got to give him credit. He understood the characters. He understood the characters, and he weaved an interesting story. I liked the voices. I liked the way he voiced Batwoman and Cassandra Cain with Batwing and Azrael with Batman. There's a lot of Tim Drake. There's so many characters there, and he did understand it, and he did weave a very interesting tale. And yeah, it was definitely it was an enjoyable long narrative to read. And I think that with respect to what he's tackling now with the help me out. Justice League Dark. I had the visual in my head and I couldn't remember that. I had Wonder Woman pictured on the title on the cover, but I couldn't picture the name. It's a great start. I mean, with Wonder Woman, with Zatanna and Constantine and Bibbo the detective chimp. I mean, I'm really curious to know where he's going to take that. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the get-go genuinely enjoyed his time on Detective, and I think there was maybe one arc where I thought the storytelling wasn't executed as well. There was an arc that he had done with like Stephanie Brown, and I think it could just quite blatantly be because I don't give a shit about Stephanie Brown. Yeah. But generally, I think he understood characters really well, and while Detective Comics certainly wasn't a highlighter of Batman and Bruce Wayne, I think he still gave Bruce the credit and the love and the accuracy that the character deserves. And I love that we got to see a lot more of Tim Drake and his detective. Tim Drake is for a lot of people their favorite Robin. Whenever you ask somebody that their favorite Robin, it's pretty much always Dick Grayson or Tim Drake. So I think that he does a good job at bringing out these things and characters that people love, that we get to see, especially Justice League Dark. Like the little bit that I've read of him writing John Constantine makes me want him and the artist on Justice League Dark, Alvaro Martinez, to do a Hellblazer book.
Yeah. I actually think I give Tynion more credit than I give Tom King, because as a matter of fact, generally speaking, I think it's more challenging to write Detective Comics than Batman.
Agreed.
And yet the writer of Batman gets the I'm just gonna say it, and I might get criticized for it, but I think it's easier to write Batman than it is to write Batman, the whole Batman family. And
Hmm.
Detective Comics is always a comic that deals with all those characters. Whereas Batman, it's easier to focus on just Batman, and every writer goes to Batman and writes their own psychological take on Batman. Well, I think it's easier in the long run to deconstruct one character than it is to try to manage all those moving parts as in Detective. Now that might be a topic for another day, but I like what Tinian did. I mean, that whole arc with Batwoman, taking down Clayface, making
Hmm.
that tough call to take him out, dealing
Absolutely.
with Cassandra Cain. I mean, those were emotional arcs. Those were character arcs that I think worked for the
Hmm.
most part. I mean, we can nitpick here, but to me, when you're dealing with that many characters, it's almost a compliment. If I nitpick and tell you what he could have done differently in Detective, well,
Yep.
the guy's writing 10 different characters.
Yeah.
I think at some point I got to cut the guy some slack, because I still remember that storyline. I still remember that story, and that's a high compliment. And I tell you
Espe-
what,
Especially with
go
how
ahead.
many books you read every week.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I tell you, and again, I'm not trying to. I actually love some of Tom King's work, but I actually remember more Detective Comics in the last 12 months than
Hmm.
I actually do Batman.
Yep.
So I think that's a compliment to him, and that's why I'm looking forward to more of what he has to say in Justice League Dark.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. When I met him for the first time, it was New York Comic Con, the October right after Rebirth had launched, and I think Rebirth launched that July, so it hadn't been more than a few months. And I that first arc I think was amazing, and I think his entire run has been fairly consistent. Again, small things here and there. I think that he did this arc with Cassandra Cain and Lady Shiva, and I think the art really detracted
Yeah.
the overall readability of that arc for me. But aside from that, James Tynion's very consistent at keeping up with these characters, and like you were kind of alluding to, a lot of his stories are very character driven. You know what I mean? And I think that the thing that he does well is kind of intertwining character driven stories and these big cinematic grandiose stories, kind of like what seems like is coming up in Justice League Dark. You know what I mean? We're getting a lot of very intricate character interactions and relations and insights on like Wonder Woman and Detective Chimp and Zatanna, but then you have this big kind of terrifying thing that's coming for everybody and for the magic in the DC universe.
Yeah.
So compliments to James Tynion. I had read a couple of small things from him before Rebirth, and actually one of the things too that I don't think he gets enough love on is the Batman and Robin Eternal, not to be confused with Batman Eternal, which was very very up and down. Batman and Robin Eternal, for a weekly series and for one of his kind of first big undertakings at DC Comics, I think was very good.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Batman and Robin Eternal. I had very much mixed feelings about that series, but uh, primarily because I really don't like the new origin that they gave Cassandra Cain.
Hmm.
Uh, I sort of had issues with that because I'm beholden to her pre-Flashpoint origins. But I will
Hmm.
say this about James Tynion, though, that I give him high compliments on, is that I know that he loves Cassandra Cain. Cassandra Cain,
Yes.
by the way, Cassandra Cain is my favorite character in the DC universe. Hands
Really?
down. Yeah, it's always has been. Uh, I got a very specific opinion about Cassandra Cain that I'll say for another day. Suffice to say that I like James Tynion. That while I wasn't a big fan of the whole mother storyline in Eternal, it was written well and it was characterized well for the story he wanted to tell. So I give him
Right.
full kudos for that. Um, it would be unfair of me to say that I don't like a story because I don't like the way the story went. Well, it was written well. It was
Hmm.
written well. I can't deny it. And what I like about Cassandra Cain, what he gets about her is Cassandra Cain's love. Cassandra Cain speaks the language of motion,
Hmm.
and see, Cassandra Cain did have sort of a form of autism in her pre-Flashpoint universe. That's how come I asked Brian Edward Hill when you were interviewing him if he thought that Cassandra Cain was somewhat autistic because he writes a character with Asperger's in Postal.
Right. Yep.
And so I was very surprised when Brian Edward Hill said no, and that he viewed Cassandra Cain more as just someone who's really good at athletics. Because, well, in any event, I love the scenes Tinian wrote where Cassandra Cain is going to the ballet because she likes, it's like she can see that's how I think he sees Cassandra Cain like that Cassandra Cain loves that language of motion. That's why she loves the ballet, because she sees something in people's movement and what they can express with their body language that other people do not. And that's one of her gifts.
Yeah.
You know? And that's why I think that Cassandra Cain has a form of autism in a sense, because she can communicate at a level beyond what the rest of us can. And that's part of her gift, but that's part of what gives her a flaw.
And
you can't see everything.
And that's also indicated in the way she fights. I mean, you see specifically, you know, when you're taking to Cassandra's perspective in a combat scenario, she has this vision and understanding of movement and the way people and the way people move in combat that no one else does. And that's what makes her rival, if not be better than Bruce in a combat situation. And I think that's kind of beautiful about how she relates to dancing, because people often say that combat is like a dance of fury, right? And the fact that that's the only way she knows how to communicate, because she's not good with words. She's not good with
That's exactly right.
She's not good at communicating verbally like most people in society are. So she sees this outlet, both combat and dancing, as a way for her to hone in and to understand how people feel.
Yeah. And what a lot of people forget, and unfortunately, and I say this as a preference, not a criticism, but Cassandra Cain used to be illiterate. She couldn't read.
Really?
And people forget about this. That was what. Now, why couldn't she read? It was simple. She only spoke the language of motion. She spoke through movement, and she could read. She could understand what you're saying, not from what you were saying, but because of your body language. It was a gift. She was trained from when she was young to have that, and that's what made her so special. Unfortunately, DC squandered it, and they pissed it all away by forgetting what made her special back in the pre-Flashpoint universe. She was a diverse character before diversity became a thing, and she also had this flaw, and she was like a diamond with a flaw, and the flaw was her strength and her weakness at the same time. When you can read body language, that makes you the best fighter in the world. When that's the only language you speak. But it was a weakness because she couldn't read. So there was, on the one hand, she could save somebody from getting beat up, but there's a couple issues there. I remember where she almost failed to save people because she couldn't read. She couldn't read the written language. And anyways, I think that well, I don't know. That's a topic for another day. I personally would have my first story writing of Cassandra Cain would be to make her illiterate and there's something wrong in their head that she can't read. Give her that flaw back. That's her weakness. She's the greatest fighter on the planet, but she can't read, and she's impaired in that way. I think that would, I don't know. That's my quirk on it.
No, I mean, that's great. Actually, in the chat, Ogo F actually says that there was a great panel where Barbara scans Cass's brain while she's trying to read.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's right. And I know that panel, and unfortunately, Cassandra's has already taught herself how to read. Barbara wanted to get her to read, but Cassandra's already knows how to read now. She's been doing it on her own. Yeah. I personally they had an opportunity to make Cassandra Cain. I mean, the last thing, in my view, that the DC universe needs right now is yet another female great martial artist. They're a dime a dozen. Cassandra Cain she's a great female artist, but give her a weakness. To me, give her a form of autism. Give her something that makes her strong, yet a potential weakness at the same time, and therefore special. Do you know what I mean? That's, I don't know.
I think that right now, what it seems like James Tynion has been trying to convey, and even Brian Edward Hill to an extent, is her weakness is her desire to be a little bit more human. And by that, I mean her inability to communicate verbally, I think makes her feel distant and granted, also her upbringing is very extreme and unlike anything that the normal person would go to. And I think that her weakness, as I understand it, is that she wants more than anything to feel involved and integrated with people and to feel loved. And it's her heart above all that I think is the thing that keeps her from, from being able to do literally anything. And you see that in even in the Batman and Robin Eternal book, where she genuinely regrets killing Harper Rowe's mom.
Right. Yeah.
And in the Detective Comics run where she's fighting Lady Shiva, the one thing that's keeping her from beating her mom's ass is the fact that she doesn't want to beat her mom's ass, because that her mom is the only. Because if I'm not mistaken, didn't David Kane die, or he's supposed to be dead?
David Kane, I believe he died. Yeah, he died at the end of Batman and Robin Eternal.
Yeah. So if I'm not wrong, that's like her last blood relative. So her feeling, her desire to feel loved and to feel normal, in a sense, to feel like she has garnered these relationships that most other people have, I think is the thing that leaves her open. But I see where you're coming from. Cassandra Cain is a fantastic character, and I think that it takes a very special writer to truly understand her and to put her on the pedal. I think the one thing I will say in defense of the way James Tynion had retconned her origin in the Batman and Robin Reborn, or Batman and Robin Eternal. Yeah, is I assume it was probably the new 52 landscape of DC just saying, you know what, we got to do something different. We have to, involve her more thoroughly in this. I don't have the same ties to her origin as you do, so I was okay with it. But I can certainly see where you're coming from.
Yeah, yeah, and to be quite blunt, it would be very easy, I think, to sort of have Cassandra continue to struggle in terms of language and the written word. Mm-hmm. And it's to me, Cassandra Cain is only is one hit to the head away from going back to the way she was.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe you petition that enough, it'll happen. Yeah. So we also, let's see. So were there any closing comments you had on Tynion before we move on?
No.
In the comments, a couple of folks had mentioned Joelle Jones, who is a 2-in-1 writer artist who is most well known for her time with her independent title Lady Killers. Did a little bit of art for Tom King's Batman and is now writing and drawing DC Comics Catwoman book. I think,
and she also wrote Being Super, a Supergirl 4-issue prestige series.
Oh, she wrote. I thought it was
No, she drew it. She drew it.
Oh,
she was
okay.
the artist. Joelle Jones was the artist on Being on the Supergirl Being Super. It was a 4-issue prestige format series. The writer was
Mariko Tamaki, I think.
That's right. But Joelle Jones was the artist on it. She also did Lady Killer. Joelle Jones wrote and drew Lady Killer.
Yeah, which I've heard spectacular things about it. I wasn't gonna pick up Catwoman until I was at the midnight release for Batman 50, and the store owner, shout out to AJ's Comics in Colchester, Connecticut, really really great shop. So if you're ever in the area, go check them out. Really cool guys. Let them know that Dark Knight Nation sent you. But he had mentioned Lady Killers. And how great it was, and he kind of started explaining a little bit of the plot and the way things kind of shake, rattle, and roll in there. And that right there, I was like, all right, like that in a Catwoman book, I'm sold. Let's do it.
Well, it's funny. I said this on another podcast or another live stream, but when Tom King did an interview with John Seitzis on Word Balloon, and he said that when he was talking to Joelle Jones about Catwoman, Joelle Jones gave Tom King some advice on writing Catwoman, which I thought was very, very good advice to Tom King, because Tom King, frankly, did not follow it in his writing of Batman so far, anyway. And that is, Joelle Jones told him that, basically, Tom, don't forget that Selina is still a thief, because Tom King in his first 50 issues really, frankly, Selina's the hero. She's always saving Batman. She's defeating, she defeat Talia al Ghul. She defeated the Joker. Batman was always the one that seemed to be losing and seemed to
Yep.
be downtrodden, seemed to be not on his A game. And yet Selina always seemed to be on her A game. Selina defeated Bane. Selina was always victorious. And
Mhm.
and she wasn't much other than when she got her wedding dress and blew into the store to get her wedding
Yeah, the
dress there.
department store. Yeah,
Yeah, but that was incidentally around the same time that Joel Jones told him, according to Tom King, that don't forget that Selina is still a thief. That's part of her nature, that she steals
absolutely.
things. And and you really get a sense of that in her first issue of Catwoman, that Joel Jones does have a sense that she's keeping Selina to her roots, while at the same time getting into that emotional core with that in that
Absolutely.
epic first issue where Selina breaks down and cries when she gets that note from Alfred.
Yep.
So she's hurt and upset too with the wedding, the marriage not taking place. Just as we know, Bruce Wayne is upset, as we see in great glory in the current issue of Batman #53.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that any better. All I can say is that I definitely echo your sentiments on the way she's handling Catwoman, and I can only look forward to reading Lady Killers and her previous work. I think her art too. Her art to me almost reminds me of um a modern day. It reminds me of Howard Porter's art, modern day. Just the way that the shapes are a little bit kind of bulkier and bold,
Yeah, and
I,
it's brighter. Her art, it's almost like a crime noir, and yet, but it's not dark. It's bright.
right.
To me, she'd make a good. She could easily draw if her art is always so bright and in your face and vibrant. Yet it could also, I can imagine it being very beautiful as a crime noir if it was even darker shaded. If that makes any sense.
Right. Imagine Brian Edward Hill had mentioned doing a question book. Imagine her and Brian Edward Hill on a question book. I'd read the hell out of that.
Oh my God, that would be awesome. There's another thing, the question book, and what else was a
A Dr. Fate book.
right, Doctor Fate, right? But yeah, a question. But I would love to see Brian Edward Hill with Joel Jones with the question, and have like I got the question back in the Denny O'Neil days when he was writing the question. Like
Mhm.
that started the classic Lady Shiva, the question, and yeah, having Catwoman even make an appearance there. I mean, take all those sort of like minor A-list characters in the DC universe and give them to Brian Edward Hill. Uh, put a black label on it, make a part of the black label line. The question, Brian Edward Hill,
Yeah.
and that would be
Yeah.
awesome.
I'd read the hell out of that. And Taylor Peckner in the chat says that her artwork is a little bit more angular than Porter. I'd agree. I mean, I don't know if you're advocating that it's a good or a bad thing, but I think that considering Lady Killer is kind of this crime action packed, murderous. That's the only way I can really describe it, considering I haven't read it. And what she's doing on Catwoman implies a lot of action and a lot of art and a lot of movement and kineticism. I think it suits her, to what she's doing in her work over what Howard Porter is doing. But but I don't think you meant to say that as a negative. I think that was just an observation. But I agree. I do agree with a long-winded way of me saying that. Taylor too had also mentioned earlier as a writer James Robinson and his critically acclaimed time on Starman, and that's one of those things that I have heard about over and over and over again, and it's in like the top of my reading list. I really really want to get into James Robinson's Starman. I've heard nothing but fantastic things about it.
Yeah, yeah. I've read the first volume of it, and it's good. I've yet to read the second volume, just a hardcover volume. It's just price points are a little
It's steep.
yeah, steep sometimes. But yeah, I will say this about James Robinson. It's sort of he's been writing for so long that yeah, that's sort of his classic stuff. I've always said his Starman is good. I'm less impressed with what he's written lately. I was extremely disappointed with his run on Wonder Woman. I
Mhm.
was very disappointed. I don't really have a lot of great things to say about it, to be honest. But before that, I loved his Earth 2 Society,
Yeah,
and I
that was
loved
a
his
fun
Earth
book.
2 and I quite enjoyed that. I don't know, but I don't think Wonder Woman is a great fit. But yeah, I mean, yeah,
I mean, I loved the concept of him like kind of playing off of what happened in Dark Side War and introducing Diana's brother. I haven't read Rebirth Wonder Woman since Rucka left. Not
right.
because I had gotten into James Robinson stuff and thought it was bad. I just, I just kind of lost touch with it because things get busy and that's life. And I was intending on going back and reading it. But he also did a little bit on Trinity, if I'm not mistaken, for Rebirth, which
Yeah,
I again another book I kind of fell off of. But he's kind of one of those guys who's like a sleeper. He really has the potential to put out some great stuff and can kind of craft, this really, I can't think of a way to describe it besides, this like a superb sphere around particular characters. And what I can gather from what he's done with Starman is, he's able to craft this world around this character where these other things exist, but
yeah.
you only want to see what he wants you to see in the sphere. That's a testament to him as a writer.
There was a passion to a Starman though that I don't know. I don't know how else to say this because it's one of those. It's sort of like the je ne sais quoi. I don't know what, but you can tell when a writer, I think, has a passion for what they're writing, and he had that in Starman. There was something special about it, and I just and there were glimpses of it in it when he wrote it too. But I don't know. I guess I never saw it in Wonder Woman, but I just think look, a guy can't hit it out of the park all the time.
True.
He's still a legend, quite frankly. He's still a great writer. He's just, I think it's a question of you got to find. Sometimes timing is something, and I don't, I just think he missed the mark on that. But I don't, I would put James Robinson in a category of almost like someone who is trying to find his mojo again. In fact, there's probably about 10 Wonder Woman comics in a row. I've reviewed every Wonder Woman comic back to issue 1 on my reviews.
Wow.
And I can tell you that if you follow the 21 issues that James Robinson wrote, I get increasingly frustrated. And I say repeatedly in multiple videos about James Robinson that the guy needs to get his mojo back because it was, it was just, I just thought it was sort of like treading wheels. And, but I think he, well, that's all I got to say about that, as far as Scump would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've heard, I've had conversations with a couple people, including Taylor in the chat about Robinson's Wonder Woman, and the consensus seems, to go anywhere from not great to kind of middle of the road, okay.
Yeah.
So we'll see whether or not I find the time to pick that up. But in the chat, Greg Rucka is getting a lot of love. Because we do breeze over as Wonder Woman. By no means is he underrated, but he certainly, is fantastic. So without saying too much, some Okie dude brings up Greg Rucka's Punisher, and Taylor talks about pretty much all of Rucka's work: Lazarus, Queen and Country, his Wonder Woman runs. So yeah, without going too much into it, I did want to acknowledge these guys in the chat and say, absolutely. I mean, Greg Rucka he's a legend, and I think he's top 10 guys still in the game today.
Yeah, and rumor has it, Greg Rucka, and this is just a rumor, that he's going to be writing Lois Lane for DC Comics, and rumor has it again. This is just rumor and innuendo that it might be a Black Label line, Lois Lane comic. And bear in mind that when Brian Bendis, he almost died of a rare disease before coming to DC.
Yeah, it was it was a heart disease, right?
It was a virus. I forget what virus it was, but it almost killed him. And anyways, Bendis gave an interview with John Citrus, a Word Balloon, and he said Greg Rucka stayed with him for 2 or 3 days in the hospital, and all they talked about was Superman comics and Lois Lane and Wonder Woman, and he really got a lot of perspective from Greg Rucka on the DC universe. And so I find that very interesting. And then to hear that that Rucka might be writing Lois Lane, I think it would be very interesting. Frankly, I think with Bendis at DC, Greg Rucka made it very clear he was never going to come back to DC. And Dan Didio mended those fences to approach Greg Rucka to get him back to write Wonder Woman. For Rebirth, and he could only write for 24 issues, double shipping. And that's what he did. And if they can get him back for Lois Lane, that'll be a heck of a coup. And you can imagine some great crossovers between Superman with Bendis and Rucka on Lois Lane. I think that would be really good.
Yeah, Rucka's one of those guys that I'll read pretty much anything he puts out. I just got I think it's Batman New Gotham, and I had I think it's New Gotham. If I'm mistaken, someone let me know in the chat. But he's one of those guys that gets pretty much every character he decides to write, and I think that's the beauty of his writing. I don't think he tackles a book where he doesn't know and love a character and have something that he wants to do and say about them.
Yeah.
And again, something that I really like in the chat, Taylor says, speaking of Greg Rucka, Liam Sharp is amazing. I agree. I had never heard of Liam Sharp before his time on Wonder Woman. And when they did that big panel, it was at like, it was at some Comic-Con out on the West Coast, I believe. And they were like, it was them unveiling all of the new DC Rebirth books, and they showed Liam Sharp's art. Immediately I became a fan of his work.
Yeah. Liam Sharp is a great artist. He is not a great writer. I read his Brave and the Bold, which was it's a visual masterpiece, and it's beautiful, but he's got a ways to go as a writer. That was probably one of my most disappointing in terms of story. He was
Really?
about Irish lore. It starred Batman and Wonder Woman. It was beautiful to look at, but it could have been any two characters in the lead role. I didn't really seem to have a handle on the story was lacking, and to make it even more unfortunate, it never actually ended. It actually ended with Wonder Woman still trapped in the land of Turnanog, and that ended in issue 6. And then he's tweeting around like the story actually had an ending. And so I held him accountable for it on Twitter, but I never got a response. And I did it diplomatically, but again, it's DC gave him an opportunity to both write as well as do the art. And so I think he can improve as a writer, because that really was his first time writing. Mm-hmm. And let's give a shout out to Liam Sharp, because I love his art, and he's going to be penciling Grant Morrison's Green Lantern.
Yes, I'm ready for it. Take my money.
Yeah, because it's going to be very interesting, because Liam Sharp does a beautiful job with Greg Rucka's run and in Brave and the Bold of doing the sort of like the jungle backgrounds and these vibrant backgrounds on different places on Earth. And it's just beautiful. He can do mystical realms. To see how he's going to draw deep space and space creatures, it's going to be interesting. We've only gotten bits and pieces of what he has to offer, so I'm definitely looking forward to it. But I have to say, I'm very glad that he's the artist and that Grant Morrison's doing the writing.
Yeah, I mean, I had waited for Brave and the Bold to finish before attempting to read it, and I'm still gonna wait a little bit until a little bit more time frees up in my schedule. I'd actually heard some pretty good things about everything in Brave and the Bold, his writing, his artwork. So actually, I think you're the first person to tell me that you didn't love it. So I think it's really interesting to hear a differing perspective on what he was doing in terms of the scripting and such. Because Taylor in the chat again chimes in and says that he loved the Brave and the Bold, but he gets where you're coming from.
Yeah, well, I actually think that one of the benefits that Liam Sharp has is he's so nice on Twitter. He's such a nice guy. Is that, I mean, let's face it, when somebody's so nice and so grateful, he's constantly thanking his fans for buying his stuff, for loving his work. He's waited literally, I think it was like 15 years to finally get his big break, he was saying. And so he was so grateful. He's such a nice guy that even I'm reluctant to say that, well, you don't want to criticize somebody, but it's constructive criticism. It's constructive criticism. They're just, I didn't really find that there was a lot of character development there. And, but hey, if I'm in the minority, there's no problem with that. So
no, I mean, hopefully I'll be able to pick up on that soon and kind of make up my opinions and thoughts on it and gather everything. We can have a discussion about it. But to each their own. And as I don't know, just as a statement, for those watching, there's nothing wrong with having criticisms of a book, but if you handle it like Comic Boom does, and you're able to bring those criticisms to the surface without being vengeful or vindictive, there's nothing wrong with that. In our last conversation, he had mentioned how he had brought up a couple of his of what he thought were shortcomings in Dark Knight's Metal, I believe, and how Scott Snyder had just messaged you back and had a casual conversation with you.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't so much a conversation. It was just a he direct message, just basically saying, sir, you didn't like it. We're doing our best. Stick with it. And like it was just, and he didn't do it on Twitter. He direct messaged,
Mm-hmm.
and by doing so, he doesn't create fodder to invite other people to maybe come on Twitter to attack. So I can understand why he would do that. But the fact that he would do that really impressed me. And as a matter of fact, the one time when I criticized, he even provided me a digital code for a free preview copy. It was of Justice League #1, a direct message. It was surprising. Like, I never asked for that. And he regularly he talks with guys on Comic Conspiracy. They do a podcast. Scott Snyder's given interviews to them, as well as he communicates regularly with the guys at Weird Science DC, and they can be pretty critical of his run as well. So he's not afraid of. He doesn't shy away from criticism, man, which is really good. It's really good to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that says a lot about a creator being able to both indulge in positive reviews and understand and question, not question, to understand and to inquire more about why people weren't feeling certain things that he does in his book. So, but not to go over about Scott Snyder, but yeah, absolutely. That I'm Liam Sharp, for him to do that, it says a lot about him as a creator. So moving into another creator from the chat, some Okie dude brings up Jerry Duggan.
Jerry Duggan, yes, Jerry Duggan is right now. Jerry Duggan is the guy who is Infinity Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And he's writing that. And one thing about Jerry Duggan is the story he had that he's telling now with Infinity Wars. My understanding is that this he was writing Guardians of the Galaxy, and this was planned. This big epic art was planned as a Guardians of the Galaxy story. But the powers that be at Marvel saw what he had in mind, and they basically suggested to make it a big event, and it's led to this Infinity Wars. And yeah, and he's finally being shown some love. I think he's getting more and more recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I'm not gonna lie. I think that I'm always I have trepidation when I don't like a billion crossovers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not big fans of Infinity Wars Prime. I got that Infinity Wars Adam Warlock, but then there was Infinity Wars Black Widow, Infinity Wars Captain Marvel, Infinity Wars some other character.
Mm-hmm.
I like it when it becomes a little bit more tight knit.
Absolutely.
But having said that, to his credit, I think with Infinity Wars #1, I found it accessible. Found it accessible with Thanos. I think with the spoil. Well, maybe I won't spoil it, but what happens to Thanos and who did it to Thanos and where we're at now with issue 2 of Infinity Wars. It was one of the key issues this week that I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's really good. I think he's good at weaving a massive tale, a massive story. The fact that I may not that I get lost easy might be my quirk. Maybe I just got to spend more time putting all the pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no question that it's I think for diehard Marvel zombies, I think they're loving it right now because especially coming out of Infinity Wars the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard really good things about Duggan and from people who are longtime Deadpool fans and particularly, I mean, not the people that just like to buy his shit from Hot Topic. They say that he wrote one of the best runs on Deadpool that he's seen in a long time, and that he found a way to incorporate both the whimsical nature and evolve the character on an emotional level. So, I mean, for someone to do that with Deadpool, I think is great rather than just following the trend of making him some goofy jackass like what DC had been doing with excuse me, not Wonder Woman, Harley Quinn as of late.
Yeah. I will say this. I never really read much of Jerry Duggan's Deadpool, except I happened to pick up. I got into Marvel in 2017 more with Secret Empire. while Secret Empire seemed to alienate a lot of Marvel fans, the irony is that it's what dragged me into Marvel, because I actually enjoyed Secret Empire. I got all the crossovers and everything, and so I collected all the Deadpool crossovers as well, and I quite enjoyed how Deadpool was written and how he became an agent, and he didn't really like helping out Hydra and what he did, and he ended up killing Phil Coulson in the Marvel universe, and he got hated by other. He kind of ruined some of his other relationships. So he was really well written, and for the first time I found myself liking Deadpool. And just a quick story about my history with Deadpool. I've never collected Deadpool at any point in my life, but if you can believe this, I got 3 issues of the first appearance of Deadpool. Not because I liked the character, but way back in the early 90s, I actually bought the 3 issues and I only bought it because they're pure fluke. But yeah, with those X-Force issues.
That's a lucky break.
It is a totally lucky break.
Well, say, he first appeared. Yeah, he first appeared. Yeah, New Mutants. It was
Yeah, it was New. I think it was New Mutants. 98 was Cable, and then was it 101 or something? Was
something near there. It was Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza.
Yeah, and they're right after the other, and I got multiples of that whole run. And
you made good decisions, my friend.
Well, no, that was pure fluke. I've it was sort of like I got a first appearance of Harley Quinn that's always on the shelf behind me here, and I picked that up at a 25-cent bin because I always collected I just collected animated comic books, and yeah, I just fluked some stuff off, and I got the first Silver Age appearance of Catwoman behind me there too. Again, when you've been collecting I've been collecting for 40 years. I mean, little fluke random pickups here and there over the span of 4 decades. I'm gonna pick up some stuff. But yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah, that's a topic for another day. We can talk about random comics we pick up that end up worth.
That'd be a fun one. I mean, I've certainly picked up books that I thought were going to be great that weren't. So that would be an interesting topic too.
Yeah.
But so another mention we got from Taylor in the chat was John Davis Hunt, who's currently on the Wildstorm books. And he says that the Wildstorm series running right now is pretty good. I mean, before I say anything, I haven't seen anything. I've seen Davis Hunt's art on like promos and solicitations and such, but I haven't read the current Wildstorm book. And I know you're picking up Michael Craig. Do you also read the current Wildstorm book?
Oh yes, yeah. It's the Wildstorm book is really good. John Davis Hunt's art is excellent. He's
oh wow.
He's well, I'm not gonna say he's got some very fine lines. It's definitely he's talented, and he's ideally suited for the Wildstorm universe. The Wildstorm universe. I mean, Warren Ellis is doing a really good job here writing it. I've collected the Wildstorm universe back in the day when it was Wildstorm. And back in the classic Planetary days and when Mark Millar wrote Warren Ellis wrote Planetary, and then there was Midnight and Apollo were on it. The Authority. Those were all part of the Wildstorm universe too. But yeah, this is a really good. What's good about the Wildstorm universe is that it's 24 issues long, the Wildstorm series, and the issues I love how they do that. They got the numbers underneath.
Yeah, they do that with Michael Cray too.
Yeah, and Michael Cray has 12 issues and Wildstorm's 24, and you know right away that it's a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can follow it. It's easy to follow. You know they're not going to cheat and lie to you, and that there won't be a cliffhanger at the end of issue 24. At least I hope not. And it's just to me it's refreshing, and it's easy to follow, and it's adult, and frankly, I would, if the Black Label line, this probably should be a Black Label comic book, quite frankly.
Really? Yeah, I know.
Michael Cray especially should be.
Yeah.
I mean, do you read Michael Cray?
I started so right before my interview with Brian, I started reading a couple issues of Michael Cray. I think I've read maybe four. So I'm still in the
Yeah.
first arc, but I really enjoyed it. And
Oh,
I can see why you'd call it a black label book. It's not afraid to shed a little
oh,
bit of blood.
it's kick
So
ass. Michael Cray.
and
I mean, when he
the
kicks Aquaman's ass and what he does to Green
Green
Arrow,
Arrow.
and 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 Wonder Woman is sort of like the main badass, the main bad guy. I mean, Wonder Woman. I mean, no one's talking about Michael Cray. I mean, it's a series where Wonder Woman is the main bad guy,
Yeah,
pretty much at this point. I mean,
it's
it's crazy.
I haven't kept up with it, but the thing I love about it is for me who hasn't I don't really know shit about Wildstorm besides, like I said, random cameos that characters have had here and there between the New 52 and Rebirth. And that
Yeah.
book felt super accessible to me. Like
It is, yeah.
I picked up this book and it was like, I feel okay that I don't know anything about Michael Cray as a character. So I guess a question I have for both you and Taylor in the chat, do you guys feel like the Rebirth Wildstorm book is something that someone like me who hasn't had a lot of Wildstorm exposure can pick up and enjoy?
Well, my answer to that is yes,
Mm-hmm.
because I think Warren Ellis writes it that way. Uh, I will say this is that it's going to challenge you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Ellis is the type of writer where he expects the reader to work a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't spoon feed you. And
Like
so,
kind of Tom King-esque in that way.
yeah, I'm sorry, but he's a better writer than Tom King.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
He's
nothing
just a
wrong with
better
saying that.
writer than Tom King, in my opinion.
Right.
I would use a different comparison for Warren Ellis. I would say that he's not as Grant Morrison can sometimes go too far in not giving the reader enough.
Mm-hmm.
Warren Ellis is a cross between a Grant Morrison and maybe a Grant Morrison and a Mark Waid. He's because I find Mark Waid to be a very good writer to give you complicated. Mark Waid can write something complicated and really simplify it in a way that really works. I'm a big Mark Waid fan.
Absolutely, yeah.
And Warren Ellis, I find to be smack dab in the middle between a Mark Waid and a Grant Morrison.
That's
and that's what I like about it.
That immediately makes him someone that I'd want to read some stories from.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Taylor agreed with your sentiments. He said that that's what got him into older Wildstorm books. So that's really good to know. So we're kind of teetering on 2 hours here. Are there any creators that like immediately come to your mind that you feel like we missed and that absolutely deserve a mention?
Well, obviously, Dark Knight. It's easy to mention many more. I'm just gonna rattle some, and I won't elaborate or talk about them because we're at the 2 hour mark. But I will say Joseph Keatage on Stellar, Image comic with Brett Blevins on art. It's really, really good. The art's incredible on this series. He's really hitting it out of the park, and I really think I bought the first issue of Extermination. I'm not an X-Men fan at all, to be honest, but I'm a big Ed Brisson fan. I loved Ed Brisson's work on Iron Fist. I think Ed Brisson is highly underrated as a writer. I credit Professor Bill at Comic Book University. He says a lot of great things about Ed Brisson on Iron Fist, and I really got into it more, particularly after listening to some of his reviews. And so, yeah, Ed Brisson, check out his Iron Fist. And I haven't read the first issue of Extermination yet, but if it's Ed Brisson, I'll give it a shot. But beyond that, I don't know. What do you think, Dark Knight?
I mean, those are the guys that I could think of offhand. Again, like you said, there's literally an ocean of comic book creators and writers, artists, inkers alike that we should probably all be aware of. But A, there's only so much time in the day, and B, there's only so much we can read. So, by ending off this discussion, it's not to be said that there aren't people that we are missing, So for those of you that have been watching or are watching this recording later, let us know in the comments. Like, let us know who you think we're missing and why you think that they're somebody that we should have potentially thought of offhand, as we get a little bit more of a look at Comic Boom's collection over there.
You guys got to buy Vinnie Mates. They're cheaper and they're really easy to set up when I do my reviews. They're They're $15 Canadian. So if you're American, it's probably even cheaper for you guys. Probably only $10 for you guys. But I love these things. You can get all the Justice League. I'm slowly every week I'm buying another. I'm trying to get get all the Watchmen, and they're nice to set up, and yeah, they're pretty cool.
I mean, you know, I'll put it here. I'll buy one if they do the thongless Dr. Manhattan.
They do. They
got
one. No, it's not thongless. They got Dr. Manhattan, but he's not. He's wearing a thong. Come on. Well, it's only a block. It's pieces of woods that are painted, so it's not like it's going to reveal much.
Oh man, I don't know. That was the decider for me, you know. But all things aside, those do look pretty cool. I'll have to check them out. I'm looking into. I just put up a trade bookshelf, and I want to, now that my my face is on the internet in some form, I kind of want to start putting like a set behind me and make things a little bit more visually appealing. That was one of the couple of reasons why I hadn't shown my face on the internet for so long, was because my walls are kind of blank. Besides, I have a print from Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's Batman run right there with the Talon kind of preying on Batman in the maze. One of these days it'll be more prominently displayed, but it's dope artwork. But that's something I'll look into for sure. So again, for people watching this later, let us know in the comments, or you know, hit me and Comic Boom on Twitter about creators that you think are hidden gems, maybe that we missed, and let us know why. You know, unless you have anything else to discuss.
No, I just want to say, Dark Knight, thank you again. You're a great host. Thank you for having me, and congratulations. I heard you're going to be interviewing Jason Fabok, so I'll be looking forward to that interview. Yeah. And good score there. And yeah, thanks for having me on. And we'll probably touch base next week or some other time.
Oh, absolutely, man. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on, man. What you bring to the table in a discussion is very unique, and the fact that, you know, sometimes we agree, and it's great to agree, but there are times where we have somewhat opposing opinions, and we're able to discuss and understand where each other comes from. And I think that's the beautiful thing about fandom, is understanding that while it's great to agree, it's also great to disagree and understand why, you know, people have their reasonings for things. And I think that you have a certain voice in your opinions and what you have to say that, again, are very unique. So I very much enjoy having you on, man. The pleasure is all mine. And even though he's not here, you know, a thank you to Joseph's Books for coming on and chatting with us for the time that he had available. He's a really busy guy with his personal life. So, thank you, you know, to you for coming on and indulging me in conversation. And, you know, this is just as much a thing for myself. You know, I'm doing this just as much for myself as I am for the audience, just to have a conversation with you and talk comics and talk storytelling and characters. So this was great. And thank you to everyone that came out and came to chat with us and engaged with us in the comments. You know, one of the things that I'm really looking to do by collaborating with these great creators and getting people to come out to these live streams is building a community where everybody can kind of talk and chat, you know, what they love and what they don't love, you know, about comic books and this medium, this storytelling medium, and do it in a constructive way. So, you know, thank you to everybody who engaged with us and gave their opinions. It's, you know, it's really great and rewarding as a content creator to see stuff like that. So thank you to you guys. Boom, are there any videos coming out on the back burner that people should know about, or stuff that you put out recently?
Well, I always do my usual. I usually try to put out 4 to 5 videos a week. By the time I get them done, my work schedule pending, they're usually out by Sunday. I try to put some out. I always review, usually I always review Batman and Wonder Woman, and then I'm going to be reviewing Justice League, and I'll be reviewing Infinity Wars issue number 2. And I might be doing a talk on the comic book price guide, issue 48. My hardcover arrived.
Nice.
Finally, I got the Howard Chaykin hardcover. I love Howard Chaykin. He's one of my favorites. And so I'll be reading the market report, the annual market report. I always, back in the day when I was young, before the internet, the only time I knew what was going on in the rest of the world for comic books was the Overstreet Price Guide, reading the annual market reports. And so I always buy it every year. Even though it's a little pricey, I don't care. But anyways, yeah. What
Yeah.
about yourself? Are you doing reviews?
So as we've mentioned countless times, I had an interview with Brian Edward Hill that without getting too far into detail, I got robbed of a couple views. So, you guys should definitely go check that out. And he's a great guy. So whether or not you want to listen to me babble on and stutter a little bit, listening to Brian talk is 100% worth it. And again, like you'd mentioned, this Saturday I'm actually going to be doing a an interview with Jason Fabik, who is a fuck it, this is my channel, so I can swear. He's a fucking superstar artist, man. He's one of my top 10 of all time. And he's going to be the artist on the upcoming Three Jokers book. He did Dark Side War. He got his start on Detective Comics in the New 52. So I am fucking over the moon about meeting this guy and chatting with him, and I'm really hoping to get a head sketch from him at the con, and hopefully that'll be our first set piece. But that's coming up. It won't be live, unfortunately, because we're going to be at a con and it's going to be noisy, and I kind of want to be able to clean up the audio so that you can clearly make out what he's saying. So that's going to be coming up, I'm hoping, by Monday. Sometime this week, I'll be doing a comics pull list episode. We'll be discussing Flash number 52, which sees a little bit of craziness that ties into what's going on in Justice League with all these cool new universal forces, which is awesome. What else am I doing? I have Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps issue 50, this wrap up to Robert Venditti's God, it's been like 7 years almost on Green Lantern, and it beautifully done. And I don't quite remember what my last book was on the review. I usually do 3 books. It is, drum roll please, Adventures of Super Sons #1. So we had mentioned a lot. We had mentioned a lot about Tomasi, and that's definitely a book that you guys should be picking up, and I'll talk about it more then. But that's what we have coming up. So if you guys aren't already, go subscribe to Comic Boom. Really great guy, and I make it a point to now, having talked to him and getting to know him, to have him on the channel as much as possible. So go check him out if you're not. At some point, I'll be putting an annotation up somewhere around yonder, so you can go check out his channel. If not, it'll be in the description as well. So, again, thank you guys for coming out and joining us. Thank you, Comic Boom, for adding to this conversation. And thank you to Joe, who is off doing Alaskan things. So you guys have a great rest of your night. Thank you for joining us. And this is Dark Knight Nation and Comic Boom signing out.
All right.